In football, there are great players, there are legends, and then there are players who become something else entirely. Not footballers, not celebrities, brands, industries, empires. And no player represents that transformation better than Neymar Jr. Because Neymar's story isn't really about football. It's about what happens when the world decides that one human being is worth more than 222 million euros. It's about the pressure of carrying a country's expectations, the burden of being compared to the two greatest players of all time, and the cost of becoming a global icon before you're old enough to understand what that actually means. This is not the story of Neymar's parties. This is not the story of the memes. And this is definitely not the story the headlines wanted you to believe. This is the story of how football's most gifted entertainer slowly became a prisoner of his own fame. The boy Brazil chose, long before the money, long before Paris, long before the criticism, there was simply a boy with a football. In Brazil, football isn't just a sport. It's a language, a religion, a national identity. Every generation searches for its next hero, its next Pele, its next genius. And by the time Neymar was 17 years old, Brazil believed it had found him. The hype was unlike anything seen in years. People weren't asking if Neymar would become a star. They were asking how big a star he would become. His dribbling looked impossible. His confidence looked unnatural. And his smile made football look fun again. When he played, stadiums filled, television ratings increased, sponsors arrived. The machine had already started, and Neymar wasn't even an adult. Most young players spend their teenage years learning football. Neymar spent his learning how to survive fame. A brand before a man. This is where Neymar's story becomes different. Most footballers become famous because they succeed. Neymar was expected to succeed because he was already famous. That distinction matters. By the time he reached Europe, millions of people already knew who he was. Sponsors invested in him. Companies promoted him. Media outlets followed him everywhere. The footballer and the brand grew together. At first, that looked like a dream. Money, attention, opportunity. But fame always asks for something in return. And eventually, it came to collect. Because once the world builds an image of who you should be, you spend the rest of your life trying to live up to it. The perfect stage. In 2013, Neymar joined Barcelona. For many fans, it felt like destiny. Football's brightest young star joining one of the greatest teams ever assembled. Alongside Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez, Neymar became part of a trio that terrified defenders around the world. MSN. 3 letters, hundreds of goals, countless memories. And for a moment, everything seemed perfect. Champions League trophies, league titles, global admiration. Neymar had arrived. Yet hidden beneath all that success was an uncomfortable reality. No matter how brilliant he became, Barcelona would always belong to Messi. The crowd loved Neymar, but they worshipped Messi. And for a player expected to become the next king of football, that reality became harder and harder to ignore. The 222 million euro decision. Then came the summer of 2017, the moment that changed everything. When Paris Saint-Germain activated Neymar's release clause, football entered a new era. 222 million euros. Even today, the number sounds unreal. Suddenly, Neymar wasn't just a football player. He was the most expensive athlete in football history. And that's when the pressure became impossible. Because nobody pays 222 million euros for normal performances. Nobody pays 222 million euros for average seasons. Nobody pays 222 million euros for second place. Every match became a referendum on his value. Every injury became a crisis. Every failure became front page news. The transfer that was supposed to set him free may have become the thing that trapped him forever. The cruel cycle. The tragedy of Neymar's career is that his greatest strength became his greatest weakness. He played with flair, with freedom, with imagination. He embarrassed defenders, and defenders hated it. Because Neymar didn't just beat opponents, he humiliated them. A step over, a rainbow flick, a nutmeg. The kinds of moments fans love and defenders never forget. And over time, those moments came with consequences. Tackles became harder, challenges became more aggressive. The physical punishment never stopped. Season after season, Neymar became one of the most fouled players in world football. Opponents knew that stopping him legally was difficult, so many tried to stop him physically. And eventually, the injuries started piling up. The metatarsal injuries, the ankle injuries, the ligament problems, the long recoveries, again and again and again. Some of the biggest moments of his career were interrupted not by poor performances, but by the simple reality that his body could not keep absorbing the punishment. In 2014, a devastating challenge against Colombia ended his world World Cup dream on home soil. In 2018, another foot injury disrupted crucial months of his season. In Paris, every comeback seemed to be followed by another setback. Every time he started building momentum, something broke, and every injury created another wave of criticism. He's distracted. He's not serious enough. He focuses too much on celebrity life. He doesn't care about football. The narrative became predictable. Neymar gets injured. People question his commitment. Neymar returns. People expect him to immediately perform miracles. And when he couldn't, the criticism started all over again. Very few people stopped to ask a different question. What if the player receiving all the criticism was also receiving all the punishment? What if football's greatest entertainer was paying a physical price for entertaining everyone else? Because when fans remember Neymar, they often remember the celebrations, the hairstyles, the headlines, the social media clips. What they sometimes forget are the hundreds of tackles that happened before those moments, the endless physical battles, the rehabilitation sessions, the months spent watching football instead of playing it. For a player whose entire identity was built around creativity and movement, every injury stole something from him. Not just games, not just trophies, but pieces of the football that made him special in the first place. And perhaps that is the most painful part of Neymar's story. The thing people loved most about him was the very thing that exposed him to the most punishment. The flair that made him famous also made him a target, and eventually, the cycle became impossible to escape. The impossible comparison. Then there was another problem: Messi and Ronaldo. No matter how good Neymar became, he was constantly measured against two players who were rewriting football history. Imagine scoring 30 goals. People ask why it wasn't 50. Imagine winning trophies. People ask why you didn't win the Ballon d'Or. Imagine becoming one of the most famous athletes on earth. People ask why you're not Messi. That was Neymar's reality. Not for one season, for over a decade. And the timing could not have been worse, because Neymar's prime years happened during the most extraordinary individual rivalry football has ever seen. While he was trying to establish his own identity, Lionel Messi was producing numbers that looked impossible. Cristiano Ronaldo was doing the same. Season after season, year after year, the standards kept moving further away, and Neymar was expected to keep up. What makes this comparison so unfair is that Neymar wasn't merely a good player. He was one of the defining footballers of his generation. In 2015, he helped Barcelona win the treble. He scored in the Champions League final. He finished among the competition's top scorers. Most players would build an entire legacy around achievements like that. For Neymar, it became just another footnote in the Messi-Ronaldo era. Then came 2017, Barcelona's historic comeback against Paris Saint-Germain, the greatest comeback in Champions League history. Many people remember Sergi Roberto's winning goal, but for long stretches of that night, Neymar was the driving force behind the miracle. He scored, he created, he inspired. Yet even one of football's most iconic performances struggled to escape the shadow of the two men above him. That was the impossible reality. Neymar wasn't competing against normal standards. He was competing against two players who combined for more than a decade of Ballon d'Or dominance. Two players who turned extraordinary into ordinary. And so every achievement felt smaller than it should have. Every trophy felt insufficient. Every season felt incomplete. The expectations were impossible because the comparison itself was impossible. The exit. By 2023, something had changed. The dream felt different. The injuries had accumulated. The criticism had accumulated. The pressure had accumulated. And so Neymar left Europe for Al Hilal. For some fans, it felt like surrender. For others, it felt like acceptance. Maybe both were true. Because sometimes greatness isn't destroyed in one dramatic moment. Sometimes it fades slowly under years of expectations that no human being was ever meant to carry. Years from now, people will debate Neymar's legacy. They will count the goals, the trophies, the records, the money. But numbers don't tell the full story. Because Neymar's career was never just about football. It was about pressure, expectation, fame, and identity. He became a superstar before becoming a man, a brand before becoming a legend. And while the world was busy turning Neymar into a global business, it sometimes forgot there was still a human being underneath the logo. Maybe that's why Neymar's story continues to divide people. Some see unfulfilled potential. Others see one of the greatest talents football has ever produced. Both arguments contain pieces of the truth, because Neymar's career exists in a space between success and expectation, a place where achievements that would define most careers somehow felt unfinished. Not because they were small, but because the expectations surrounding him became impossibly large. Maybe Neymar wasn't football's biggest disappointment. Maybe he was football's biggest warning, a reminder that when fame becomes too large, talent alone is no longer enough. A reminder that even the most gifted players are still human beings, and that sometimes the pressure to become the next great icon can prevent people from appreciating the greatness already in front of them. And perhaps that's the saddest part of all. Not that Neymar failed to become the next Messi, but somewhere along the journey, the world stopped appreciating Neymar for being Neymar.